A typical security guard coming to you with an end of the evening live stream. I want to come on here and talk about the top 5 benefits of feeling fear, the sensation of fear when you're working as a security guard. I read a message board. There was a younger guard, and he said that he had his first situation where something kind of went south. He was dealing with a trespassed individual. He was trying to remove this individual, and as he's removing this individual, multiple people, 3 or 4 other people become involved in the situation. So he's trying to walk this person off of property. The person's becoming combative, and as the person is becoming combative, other people on the peripheral start chiming in. People are calling him a rent-a-cop. People are calling him a wannabe cop. They're calling him a piece of shit. Back and forth. This is his first time ever being involved in this situation. And he says, I started to feel myself get nervous. I started to feel myself like feeling fear. And he says that while he's giving the directive for the person to leave the property, his voice cracks. And he says that when his voice cracks, everybody starts pointing at him. They start making fun of him. And he said he just felt like he wanted to die. He felt absolutely horrible about the situation. So I wanted to come on and talk about this because not only have I experienced that myself, I think that we all do. If you work in private security at some point in time, you're going to deal with something like that, right? But also, I was listening to my man, Commander Hall, who had a video up talking about the dangers of working in private security. We have talked about, over and over, all the things that you deal with, the things that you're going to have to potentially deal with working in private security, working by yourself, working a post where you don't have any backup. And Commander Hall said something that I understood where he was coming from, but I didn't quite agree with it. He said, in this industry, you can't be afraid. You can't feel fear in situations where you're dealing with someone, where you're dealing with a situation. You can't be timid. And although I understand where he's coming from, and I feel that, in a very real sense, you can't be scared, right? You still have to act. You still have to move towards the issue, no matter what that issue is. But I feel that feeling fear is very important to you, not only being successful in what you do, but also keeping yourself out of trouble. So I was thinking to myself, what are 5 ways that feeling fear working in security is actually to your benefit? Let me get a drink here. Dehydrated. Hang on. All right. So it's important to understand that fear is simply a parasympathetic response that you're having to a situation. We call it fear, right? But really, it's just anxiety based on the adrenaline from the situation that you're dealing with, okay? In any situation where you, let's say, potentially have to go hands-on, or you can take it, even a step further and say this is a situation where potentially you might have to draw your firearm. I think that feeling fear is so essential to you not only being successful, but you not finding yourself in a situation where you get hurt or harmed, you hurt or harm someone else, or you put yourself in a position where you're either civilly liable or legally responsible for making a bad decision, right? If you're in a situation where you potentially have to go hands-on with someone and you're feeling that fear, you're feeling that anxiety, this is natural. Everybody has one of 3 responses to that adrenaline dump. It's going to be fight, flight, or freeze. Some people are natural fighters. I know a couple of guys. It doesn't matter if they are in a situation where it's 1 against 4. It doesn't matter if they're in a situation where the other person has a weapon and they don't. It doesn't matter. It's like they're against all logical odds. Some people are just fighters. They're born to fight. Some people are natural flighters, right? Fight, flight, or freeze. Some people are natural flighters. They will do everything that they can to not get into a physical confrontation. They don't like confrontation. They don't want to fight. They'll do everything that they can to try and avoid a fight. I am that person, right? I will do everything that I can to de-escalate a situation and not have to fight, right? There's other people that don't really know which category they fall into, and most often those people find themselves freezing. I think that people that have thought about situations and what they will do if they were to arise, people that have been in situations and know what they will do when they arise, those people fall into that fight or flight category. The people that never think about it, the people that don't assume that they will ever find themselves in a physical confrontation, people that are just never placed in that environment, they generally tend to freeze because it's a situation that they've never thought about, right? When you are faced with that situation of having to go hands-on, of having to get physical, the number one thing that you're feeling fear about is self-harm. You do not want to get hurt. Now, I want to tell you that that's a smart thing and that's a good thing. Self-preservation is very important. You should not want to get beat up. You should not want to get harmed. You definitely should not want to get shot or stabbed. How does this help you in your job? If you're feeling that fear of potential self-harm, what does it do? It makes you very aware of your surroundings. The situational awareness kicks in. You start to look at the person that you're dealing with. You start to gauge the distance between you and them. You start to scan for any potential weapons. You start to kind of look around to see if anybody else is potentially with this person. Your fear of being harmed is one of the greatest benefits that you can have working in a security capacity when you potentially have to get into a physical confrontation, because that self-preservation is so important to you not allowing yourself to get hurt. What's number two? Number two is the fear of harming someone else. People who do not feel the fear of harming someone else, those are huge red flags for me. You have to have enough empathy and sympathy to give you pause. Now, I don't want you to pause and worry about harming the other person so long that you allow yourself to get hurt, you allow a third party to get harmed. But remember, our job is to be a deterrent. Our job is to observe and report first, right? Our job is to be only in a defensive posture. And I want you to remember that when you're engaging with someone, you still have a responsibility. If you have to go hands-on, if you have to, God forbid, utilize a firearm, you still have a responsibility to only respond with the needed necessary force. So the second thing that should be giving you a little bit of fear, a little bit of trepidation, is the fear of potentially harming, hurting, or killing the other person. That should, in some way, measure your response to the situation. What's the third thing that would give you a feeling of fear? It's the liability. It's not just the liability of potentially harming someone, it's the liability of potentially being in the wrong. You should have a pause where you're thinking about all of your actions. Are you within the scope of your work? Are you within the post orders? Are you operating in a capacity where you are in the right? A lot of times security guards are getting involved in things. They're allowing things to escalate. They're allowing things to get to a point of a physical confrontation when in all reality, they should not have gotten there. What's the fourth thing? The potential backlash. The backlash from your company, the backlash from the public, the backlash from the legal side of things. All of our actions have a equal and opposite reaction. And you going hands-on, you getting physical, you getting into a confrontation, once that happens, the wheels of circumstance, the wheels of justice, the wheels of administration within your company, within the contract that you're working for, a lot of those things are now out of your hands. We tend to think that if we go hands-on with someone, if we get into a physical confrontation with someone, that we control the entire dynamic, and you don't. A lot of things can happen once you allow yourself to get into that physical confrontation. You might win the confrontation. You might lose. You might come out unscathed. You might get hurt. The other person might simply leave the premises, or you might do something to them. They leave, they come back, and now they harm you after the fact. There's so many things that can happen in the confrontation side, so many things that happen in the administration of the company that you work for, the company that you're servicing, so many things that can happen on the legal side after the fact, that once you have decided to go hands-on, it's completely out of your control. What's the fifth thing? The fifth thing that gives you the feeling of fear and the most uncontrollable aspect is the unknown. When you decide to engage, when you decide to get into this next step of a physical confrontation, you simply don't know what is potentially going to happen. Everything that I talked about, everything that I hit on, that's the great unknown, because when you're in these situations, it's completely out of your control. All of these things are giving you that feeling of anxiety that we are labeling as fear. And I want to share with you, I want to tell you, I want to explain to you, I want to get across to you that all of those feelings, they're beneficial, because those are all things that you should be thinking about. Those are all things that you should be worried about in the capacity of your job, because as a security guard, you do not have qualified immunity. As a security guard, you have a very small window of authority, a very small window of ability to enforce policy, to enforce any sort of property rules. Very, very little. So all of these feelings that are coming up inside you, that are making you feel a little bit nervous, that are making you a little bit worried, those are all benefit. And you should listen to them. Now, here's the trick. You have to know when to recognize those, when to allow them to be an EQ, like a stereo system, an EQ of how you're interacting with this person, where you're standing, what tools you might potentially use, whether or not you choose to engage or not to engage. But when it's go time, for your safety, for the safety of the other people that are there, the safety of the property that you're protecting, when it's go time, you have to not be scared. There's a very big difference between fear and being scared. That fear is there to warn you. Being scared will potentially keep you from acting. That's the freeze. And in our profession, you can't have the freeze. And I would say that that is where Commander Hall was coming from. You cannot freeze. When it's time for you to respond, when it's time for you to act, when it's time for you to protect yourself, to protect the third party, to protect your property, you have to be able to respond. You can be fearful. You can have that feeling of anxiety. You can have that worry about all those 5 things that I brought up. But you can't be so scared that you don't act. And I would say that that is the message that he was trying to send. So I got that. I felt that. It resonated with me. But I wanted to come on and make my own little video about this, because I hear that a lot. And for a lot of guys, I want you to know this. It's okay to have that fear. No one is expecting you to be, a forward operator. No one is expecting you to be a cop. No one is expecting you to be the toughest guy in the room. You have a job to do. And your job, first and foremost, observe and report. Your secondary capacity, if you're working in some of these jobs, if you're working in some of these environments, it's to be a responsive, reactive force on that property. And if that is the role that you're taking up, you have to be ready, willing, and able to do that. In our DPSST training, the first question that they ask you when you certify The first question that they ask you when you certify as an armed officer: do you understand that you may be placed in a circumstance where you have to take another person's life? Yes. Are you willing and able to do that? Yes or no? Yes. You can't go on to the next portion of the class. You can't go on through the next process of being certified as an armed officer if you haven't asked yourself that question and you haven't emphatically answered yes. All of the being scared, all of the being afraid, all of the trepidation, it has to be done right then, right there, before you go through the remainder of your certification. Because once you put the vest on, once you strap on the firearm, once you're in that position, you're the only person that's there, God forbid, when that situation arises. And that is not the time for you to be asking yourself that question. But at the same time, understanding that that feeling of fear, that feeling of anxiety, 110% normal. And I do not have any negative feelings towards any person who works in this industry if they were to admit that they have fear. Guys, I have been there. I've responded to a homicide. I have seen the inside of a person's head. I've been in that environment. I've been in that circumstance where I didn't know if the person who had killed that person was still in the vicinity. And I felt that fear. And I have relived that situation for the past 2 years. I think about it every single day. And I give myself credit for knowing that even though I felt that fear, even though I had that anxiety in that situation, I still carried out my duties. I still did what I was there to do. And at the end of the day, that's what's important. It does not make you less of a man. It does not make you less of an officer. It does not make you less of a protector or a provider because you found yourself in a situation where you were feeling that fear. That's normal. It's normal. You just can't be scared, bro. All right. All right, guys. I think that is all that I have for you tonight. I will see you guys first thing in the morning. If you're working a night shift, please make sure that you're watching your back, you're taking care of yourself, you're doing everything that you can to be protected tonight. I want you to watch your six. And as always, I want you to be great. Okay? I'll see you guys tomorrow. Y'all take care.